He conquered more land in 11 years than Rome did in centuries. But the question historians have argued about for 2,000 years is not how he won. The question is, what was he really? A military genius? A philosopher-king? God who forgot he was mortal? Or simply a man who moved so fast the world could not keep up?
To understand Alexander, you have to start where he started, a kingdom the rest of Greece barely took seriously. Macedonia in 356 BC was a borderland, half Greek, half tribal, perpetually at war with its neighbors. Its king, Philip II, was one of the most cunning rulers who ever lived. Philip invented the Macedonian phalanx, a wall of 18-foot spears that no army had ever faced. He remade warfare. And then he began to remake his son. Alexander was born in July 356 BC, on the same night. Legend says that the temple of Artemis at Ephesus burned to the ground. His mother Olympias took this as a sign. She told Alexander his real father was not Philip, but Zeus himself. Whether he believed her is a question that would follow him to his last breath.
As a boy, Alexander showed two things early: extraordinary intelligence and a hunger that could not be satisfied. When Persian ambassadors visited the palace while Philip was away, the 10-year-old Alexander questioned them about Persian roads, distances, and the great king's army. The adults were unsettled. Philip watched his son and made a decision. The boy needed a teacher worthy of him. The horse came before the throne. When Alexander was 12, a dealer brought a black stallion to Philip's court that no man could ride. The horse came before the throne. When Alexander was 12, a dealer brought a black stallion to Philip's court that no man could ride. Alexander noticed the horse was afraid of its own shadow. He turned Bucephalus to face the sun, so the shadow fell behind. Then he mounted him and rode at full gallop. Philip wept watching his son return. And he said, "My boy, seek a kingdom worthy of yourself. Macedonia is too small for you."
In 343 BC, Philip summoned Aristotle, the greatest mind in the Greek world, to tutor his 13-year-old son at a garden sanctuary called Mysa. For 3 years, a philosopher and a prince walked and talked and changed each other. Aristotle taught him medicine, philosophy, rhetoric, and science. He also gave him a copy of the Iliad, annotated in his own hand. Alexander slept with that book and a dagger under his pillow for the rest of his life. In it, he found his model, Achilles, the hero who chose a short, glorious life over a long-forgotten one. He had found the story he intended to live inside. At 18, Alexander commanded the left wing of cavalry at Chaeronea and broke the sacred band of Thebes, an elite unit that had never been defeated. They died where they stood. Every single one. Then everything changed. In 336 BC, Philip II was assassinated at his daughter's wedding. Alexander was 20 years old. He moved within hours. Rivals were eliminated. The army acclaimed him king before the week was out. He stood in his father's throne room and decided it was only the beginning. The Greek city-states revolted immediately. They expected a boy. They got Alexander. When Thebes revolted, Alexander leveled it, selling 30,000 people into slavery. One building was spared, the house of the poet Pindar, because Alexander had read him. The message to Greece was received. At Corinth, the remaining city-states submitted. Alexander was 20, and the Greek world was his. In spring 334 BC, Alexander crossed the Hellespont into Asia with 37,000 men. He was 21. Before setting foot on Asian soil, he hurled his spear into the earth to claim it as spear-won land. His first act in Asia was to visit Troy, to pay homage to Achilles. He placed a wreath on the hero's tomb. His companion Hephaestion placed one on the tomb of Patroclus. The symbolism was not subtle. The Persian Empire they were marching against was the largest the world had ever seen. 50 million people, from Egypt to India. The great King Darius III received news of the crossing and dismissed it. That was his first and most consequential mistake.
At the Granicus River, Alexander led the charge himself, directly into Persian spears, into the water. He nearly died on that bank. A Persian nobleman raised a battle axe over his cracked helmet. His friend Cletus the Black cut off the man's arm a fraction of a second before the blow landed. Alexander owed Cletus his life. After Granicus, the Greek cities of Asia Minor opened their gates. They had been under Persian rule for 150 years. Some of the people weeping in the streets had never known anything else. In Gordium, he faced the legendary Gordian knot, a rope so complex no one had ever untied it. The prophecy said whoever solved it would rule all of Asia. Alexander drew his sword and cut it in half. He did not accept the rules of the puzzle.
Darius finally took the field himself at Issus in 333 BC. With an army 3 times the size of Alexander's, he had chosen a narrow coastal plain, thinking it would neutralize Macedonian cavalry. Alexander attacked directly toward Darius himself, not the center of the army, but the king. When Darius saw him coming personally, he broke. He fled the battlefield in his chariot. He left behind his army, his mother, his wife, his daughters. Alexander captured the entire Persian royal family. He treated them with complete honor, their own guards, their own servants, their own royal ceremony. He bowed before Sisigambis, the queen mother, because that was what a great king did.
He marched south to Tyre, an island fortress city that no army had taken in centuries. Alexander built a causeway across the sea to reach it. It took 7 months and killed thousands of his men. He entered Egypt in 332 B.C. The Egyptians saw not a conqueror, but a liberator. He was crowned pharaoh in the ancient ceremony, honored the Egyptian gods, and chose the site of a new city, Alexandria. He marked the city plan in the sand himself. He was building the world he intended to leave behind.
Then he made a journey no one quite understood. 300 miles into the Sahara Desert to the oracle at Siwa. No one knows what question he asked. No one knows what answer he received. He came back and said only that he had heard what he needed to hear. The priests of Siwa called him the son of Zeus Ammon. Alexander never denied it. In autumn 331 BC, at a place called Gaugamela in modern Iraq, Alexander and Darius met for the last time. Darius had prepared the ground carefully, flattened and cleared for his vast cavalry. He brought war elephants, scythed chariots, riders from 40 nations. The largest army the ancient world had ever seen. The night before the battle, Parmenion urged a night attack. Alexander refused. "I do not steal my victories." He slept soundly. His officers could not. At Gaugamela, Alexander deliberately created a gap in his own battle line. Persian cavalry poured into it. And then Alexander curved behind them, cutting directly for Darius again. Darius fled again. This time the empire shattered behind him. Babylon surrendered. Susa surrendered. The treasuries of Persia opened their doors.
The treasure at Persepolis alone required 20,000 mules and 5,000 camels to carry away. The wealth of 2 centuries of Persian Empire, moving west in an endless caravan. Then Persepolis burned. Whether by order or by accident remains debated. Eyewitnesses said Alexander lit the torch himself. He stood in the ruins the next morning and said nothing. Darius was murdered by his own satraps before Alexander could reach him.
stabbed, and left in a ditch by the road. Alexander arrived to find him already dead. He removed his own cloak and laid it over the body of the fallen king. He wept. He had wanted to take Darius alive. He ordered a full Persian royal funeral.
He then pursued Bessus, the satrap who had killed Darius, eastward into Bactria and Sogdia, modern Afghanistan. For 2 years, he fought an enemy that would not stand and fight, that melted into the mountains after every skirmish. Bactria broke Alexander in ways that Persia never could. The guerrilla war had no decisive battles, no clear victories, no end he could see. It was here that Alexander fell in love with Roxana, a Bactrian chieftain's daughter. He married her. His generals were appalled. Alexander did not care. He finally caught Bessus, had him tried for regicide by Persian law, and executed. Then he turned east toward India.
But not before the worst night of his life. At a drunken banquet in Marakanda, modern Samarkand, Alexander killed Cletus the Black with a spear thrown across the room. Cletus had saved his life at the Granicus. That night, drunk, he had criticized Alexander's claims to divinity. Alexander could not take it back. When he understood what he had done, he tried to fall on his own sword. His guards stopped him. He shut himself in his tent for 3 days, refusing food. He called out Cletus' name into the dark.
India was the edge of the known world. Alexander's army crossed the Hindu Kush in winter, over passes 11,000 feet high. Men froze, horses died. On the other side was everything Aristotle had ever described, and more. Most Indian kingdoms submitted or allied with him. But King Paris of the Parava kingdom refused. He waited at the Hydaspes River with 200 war elephants. Alexander had never faced war elephants before. He trained his men for weeks. Then he crossed the Hydaspes at night in a thunderstorm, 17 miles upstream, masked by rain and thunder. The Battle of the Hydaspes was his hardest fight. The elephants crushed phalanx formations. Men were trampled alive. Alexander won, but the word for what it cost does not exist in any ancient language. Bucephalus, Alexander's horse since the age of 12, died at the Hydaspes. He was approximately 30 years old. Alexander named the city after him, Bucephala. His horse outlived him in stone. When Paris was brought before him in chains, Alexander asked how he wished to be treated. Like a king, Paris said. Alexander gave him his kingdom back. And more, he made him an ally.
But at the Bees River, one more river east, his army finally stopped walking. They had marched 11,000 miles. They had been away from home for 8 years. They wept and refused to go further. Alexander retreated to his tent for 3 days. He came out and announced the march home. He never forgave them. The march home through the Jedrosian desert became a punishment without announcement. A quarter of the army died from heat and thirst. When someone offered Alexander water in a helmet, he poured it into the sand, because not all of his men could drink. Back in Babylon, he executed governors who had misruled in his absence. He held a mass wedding at Susa. 80 officers married Persian noblewomen. He was modeling a world he was not certain he would live to see. The Macedonian veterans hated the Persianization. At Apis, they mutinied. Alexander walked into the crowd alone and pointed out the ringleaders for arrest himself. Then he dismissed the entire Macedonian army from his service. They came back within 3 days, weeping, begging. He held a banquet of reconciliation and wept with them. He had plans, Arabia, then Carthage, then perhaps Rome. He died with the plan still in his head, unwritten, uncommanded, unfinished.
Then the worst thing happened. Hephaestion died from fever in Ecbatana before Alexander could reach him. Alexander ordered empire-wide mourning. He fasted for 3 days, and he was never the same. The one person who had known him since boyhood, who could say anything to him, was gone. In June 323 BC, in Babylon, Alexander fell ill after a banquet. He had a fever that would not break. His soldiers, hearing he was dying, demanded to file past his bed one by one. He could no longer speak. He raised his eyes to each one of them. When they asked who should inherit his empire, he said, "The strongest." He died on June 10th, 323 BC. He was 32 years old. Babylon woke the next morning as it always had. Markets opened, the river flowed. History held its breath for a moment, then kept moving.
His body was preserved in honey in a crystal tomb in Alexandria, visited by rulers for centuries. Then it disappeared. Nobody knows where it is today. The Greek language he carried across the world became the language of commerce, scholarship, and eventually early Christianity. The New Testament was written in Greek. He never could have predicted that. He was not perfect. He burned Persepolis. He killed Cletus, the man who saved his life. He chose ambition over mercy when mercy cost him something. But he was also the man who covered Darius with his own cloak, who gave Paris his kingdom back. He slept with the Iliad under his pillow because he believed he was living the same story as Achilles, and spent 32 years trying to prove it. He got what he chose, the short, glorious life, the entire known world. 2,300 years later, people still name their sons after him, not as a reference to history, simply because they want their child to grow up to be something great. He was a man who read a book as a boy and decided to live inside it. The world has been arguing about what he was ever since.